Welcome, fellow Rotarians and guests. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let us pray. Most gracious God, who gives the fruits of the earth for the benefit of all your creatures, we give thanks to you for abundant harvests and plentiful production on this earth. We pray for those in our land who are denied these gifts and seek your forgiveness for our complicity in their want. We pray for those whose voices are not heard and for those who do not hear. Forgive us when our choices are selfish ones, and forgive us especially when we do not choose to raise our own voice against the pain of our brothers and sisters who suffer needless want. Today, may we seek out to learn so we all can contribute in a way that helps to satisfy the gaps that exist in our own communities. Amen. All right. I'd like to take a moment now and welcome all of our guests to Downtown Rotary. So if you are a guest of Downtown Rotary, please stand and be welcomed, please. Welcome. I'd like to now invite up Eric Erickson, who's going to update the club on some protocol that we're implementing here today.
Thank you, President Jason. Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians and guests. As you came in today, you noticed that we have gone back to a kind of a normal here in Rotary where you get your badge and we scan it and we greet you. And if you consider the reason you chose to be a Rotarian, while it's important to serve our community as a Rotarian, it's also meeting one another and getting to know people that you don't otherwise encounter in your daily business life. And to help us do that, it's always helpful to have a name associated with the person that you're talking to. And it also serves another purpose, which is to track attendance. Not that you're going to get booted out if your attendance falls below a certain percentage. There was a day that happened, but we like to just know, and for your sake, how often you're coming. And what I really could use, and what would be helpful, is to have greeters sign up. And I will send an email to all of the new members, and that's the great thing about having a lot of new members. I have a big pool of people to choose from for new greeters, and it's a great way for you new members to meet people as they walk in the door. And don't be embarrassed to say, I can't remember your name. Or if you can help them as you walk in, say, my number is 75, and then they're like, oh, hi, Bill, how are you? So watch for an email if you're a new member. I encourage you to sign up on the spreadsheet on the link that I will send you, and we'll just do this going forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Eric. And as a reminder, we brought this up last week. That would be Eric Erickson the first, because we do have two Eric Ericksons now part of the club. Now, new member inductions. We do have two new member inductions today, which has become quite customary. So the first new member induction will be Amanda Kipley, who will be introduced by Rotarian Jesse Schmidt.
Hello, fellow Rotarians. It is my pleasure to induct the third Kipley into Downtown Rotary. No surprise to any of you, I met Amanda because of her father-in-law, the biggest jackrabbit in our club. And he's not here to celebrate her induction today because he is on his way back from Frisco, Texas, which is no surprise to any of us. So, but I was at a lunch exactly like this, having lunch with Dan, and he said, you know, you really should meet my daughter-in-law. She's not like me. She's exceptionally intelligent. She is a Notre Dame graduate, and we had that in common. And she now has a passion to do some service. And I'm not quite sure because Amanda, in addition to being an assistant public defender who is starting a trial this week, she's a mother and she's in the National Guard. And she agreed to serve on the board of the Bishop Dudley Hospitality House with me. Amanda knows our population and our guests that we serve, so it's great for us on the board to have somebody that sees it from her perspective. It's invaluable to us. So it's my pleasure to make the introduction and induction of Amanda Kipley. Please welcome me in joining her.
Well, thank you so much, Jesse, and thank you to everyone for welcoming me into the Rotary Club. As Jesse said, I'm an assistant federal public defender with the Federal Public Defender's Office here in Sioux Falls. I've been with them for about 5 years. In that capacity, I represent indigent criminal defendants in front of the U.S. District Court here in Sioux Falls and in front of the 8th Circuit on appeal. That's an area that I'm particularly passionate about. I like litigation. I like being in the courtroom. As Jesse said, I'm set to begin a trial soon. But it also gives me an opportunity to work with individuals every day that allows me to help confront and see various issues that our community struggles with as well. Poverty, addiction, abuse, food insecurity that we're going to talk about today. When I talked to Jesse about Rotary and I came to one of your meetings, I was really struck when somebody talked about how they're trying to move this club from a place just where important people gather to a place where important conversations happen. And over the past year during COVID, I've had a chance to watch some of your meetings and some of those conversations online. I've been able to visit some of your meetings, and I really have been impacted by some of those conversations about race in our community, about law enforcement in our community, about students in our schools. And I think it's important to be part of those conversations. And so I'm very thankful that I have that opportunity to be here and be part of that. I hope that I bring a unique perspective, both in my military background and what I do every day. And I look forward to meeting you all and hopefully finding more outlets for my clients as they transition back into our community and try to get their feet under them and move forward as members of this community. Thank you.
One more. I'd like to now invite up Brad Rayfeld, who will be introduced by Rotarian Dan Doyle.
Thank you, President Jason. It's my pleasure to introduce Brad Rayfeld. Brad was born and raised in Sioux Falls. He attended college at the University of South Dakota and graduated from the Beacon School of Business with a degree in finance. Upon graduation from USD, Brad returned to Sioux Falls and received his MBA from the University of Sioux Falls. He joined Marsh McLennan Agency in 2015 as a risk management consultant and specializes in the design and administration of business insurance programs. Brad is active in the community and is involved in many local nonprofits and charities. And he's blessed, very blessed, to be married to a fine, upstanding woman, my sister, Katie. So I think he did all right there. And Brad and Katie stay busy looking after their two young and very spirited children, Lewis, Rosalind, and my godson, Crew. So I'm very proud of Brad and proud to invite him up here and to introduce him to all of you. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. As Dan said, I was born and raised here in Sioux Falls. I attended school down at the University of South Dakota in Vermilion. When I was away at school, I had always known that I want to come back to Sioux Falls and put my roots down here to raise my family or start my family and also build my career within this community. As many of you are aware, Sioux Falls is continuously ranked among the top cities within the entire country for doing business and livability. And one of the things I believe that exemplifies that or that brings that to the next level is all the leadership and the contribution from community leaders, being forward-thinking and very charitable. And I've been able to attend some of the meetings prior to coming here today, and it's very evident that this group, that this charter exemplifies that stewardship that I'm seeking in moving the community and the reputation of Sioux Falls forward. So I really appreciate it, and I look forward to getting to know many of you on a deeper level and working alongside of you in continuing the forward momentum of charity and making Sioux Falls just a great place to live. So thank you.
Brad and Amanda, welcome to Downtown Rotary, and we have no doubt that you'll make meaningful contributions to this club and this community. All right, the program. Matt, okay. I will read brief bios of our three distinguished panelists that we have joining us today. We'll begin with Matt. Matt Gassen is the CEO of Feeding South Dakota and has been since 1999. Matt is responsible for the state's largest charitable hunger relief organization, where he coordinated the merger of South Dakota's 2 food banks in Rapid City and Sioux Falls, creating a single statewide nonprofit organization. He also facilitated the addition of a 3rd food bank distribution center in Pierre, led an organizational rebrand to better align with Feeding America, the nation's largest domestic hunger relief organization, a powerful and efficient network of 200 food banks across the country. Prior to becoming a food bank director, Matt spent 23 years in the U.S. Air Force before retiring in 1998. Matt serves as a member of the Feeding America, National Affiliate Council, and other several community organizations, including Downtown Rotary. Matt and his wife, Charlene, have 3 grown sons who are married and are blessed with 13 wonderful grandchildren. Please join me in welcoming Matt Gassen. And Josh Hayes is the Assistant Director of Operations for the Faith Temple Food Giveaway and has worked in the nonprofit and business sectors for over a decade. He's a recipient of a 30 Under 30 award and is a recognized innovator in the nonprofit and for-profit sectors, leading nationwide pilot programs with success. Over the past decade, he has had the privilege of working directly with clients, executives, and stakeholders to gain a full picture of the systems currently in place. He is a regular guest lecturer at numerous universities on the complexities of public health, food insecurity, and how using consumer psychology can be used to target individuals with the greatest needs, making sure their needs are successfully met. Please join me in welcoming Josh Hayes. And last but not least is Michelle Erpenbach. Michelle is the president of Sioux Falls Thrive, a workforce development community partner focused on children's success from cradle to career. Thrive action teams bring together a broad range of organizations to collaborate in tackling the difficult issues of food insecurity, out-of-school time, and affordable housing. Michelle is a longtime community advocate and communications professional who served 2 terms on the Sioux Falls City Council. And please join me in welcoming Michelle Erpenbach. All right, Cindy, the show is yours.
Well, on behalf of Downtown Rotary, thank you all for being here and bringing your leadership and perspective to this important conversation. And Matt, since you're sitting right next to me, I'm going to start with you. What does food insecurity mean? How has that conversation about this topic evolved from people being hungry?
Well, food insecurity is a term, I think, that is used to better describe the challenges that people have with gaining access to the food that they need. I think we could talk about it in the terms of hunger, but I think hunger puts a whole different perspective in your mind about what that looks like. But food insecurity is really just boils down to the lack of consistent access to enough food to live really a healthy and active life. That's kind of the USDA definition of what food insecurity is. I think hunger is generally perceived as being perpetually chronic all the time, not having access to food, where food insecurity, people can really move in and out of that need for food assistance. Some are very need it consistently, others not as much. So, although it's a little bit broader, I think, term and perspective for the challenges that we face, not only in the city but across the state. That's really how I see the issue of hunger as we see it today in South Dakota.
Michelle, Josh, I saw you both nodding along. Would either of you like to add to how you describe it, or other elements this group would benefit from hearing?
You know, I would just like to echo what Matt said in regards to it's really fluid where people can go in and out of food insecurity. It's not just a stamp that once they have that, they're stuck in that. But it really is that fluid motion. And thank you, Matt, for really focusing on that.
Michelle, anything you'd add?
One of the things that Thrive bases most of its work on is the data around food insecurity and the topics that Thrive is working with across the community. And our most recent data is 2018. It's 11% of families in Minnehaha County that are technically food insecure. So more than 1 in 10 families in the Sioux Falls area food insecure. And then the other bit of data that we're working off of now is a brand new study that looks at the neighborhoods that feed into Laura B. Anderson Elementary School, which is east of Smithfield. It includes the Norton and Froelich areas up on the North Cliff Hill, and then the Valley View Trailer Park out by Great Bear. But those, the data that's coming out of those neighborhoods now, I brought it with me, printed it out, because I wanted to read some of the quotes for you, and one of them fits in this very, very well for us. This concept of many of those neighbors actually downplay their concerns about whether there's enough food on the table in their homes. And then during follow-up questions, they would be a little more open. And so this is a quote that kind of encapsulates it for me. "It's better now," this person said. "We struggled up until, about 4 weeks ago. There were a lot of things that we weren't able to get. We lived off a lot of the school programs that LBA has where the kids could go over and get lunch." And as Josh alluded to, that same person then will talk about, it's okay now, but 4 weeks from now might be a completely different thing. And so Matt gives you that specific definition, but to be food insecure is that concept of maybe have it this week, but don't know about next week. So.
Well, and maybe if you want to either allude to, offer a little bit more, and I'd love for everyone to jump in on this, help this room understand, and I think you started speaking to it, Michelle, the vastness of those in our community who are food insecure. You've offered some statistics, if there's others to share, so that we get a sense of the people, the families, the children that we're talking about. Anything you would add to that vastness?
Well, from a school district standpoint, and the thing that you'll always hear me say is we have an amazing school district. That isn't where our issues are, particularly with Sioux Falls Thrive. We're working on that ecosystem around the school district. But you all know there's 8 neighborhood-based Title I schools in Sioux Falls. That means between 60 and 90% of the families in those schools qualify for free or reduced lunch rates. And we also looked at those neighborhoods that feed into those schools. Most of those families are in the 10 to 20% poverty rate, so that the numbers for those families in those particular neighborhoods are dramatic. And you know, too, that those 8 schools are all north of 18th Street. And so we've tended to segregate those folks as well. Not on purpose, but that really is how that has worked out for us, right? So one other then little quote that I would give you, just to give, again, not showing the vastness, but putting kind of a point on it, and because our data is so new, one of the comments that this woman says is, she says, "It's terrible. I'm one of the parents that they consider that I make too much to receive assistance from the government. But I'm with 3 kids. It's really hard. I mean, I go to food pantries when I can, or I'll go to the church when they give out the food and stuff like that. I have teenage boys, and I feel like they don't get enough to eat. They're always hungry. Always." You can relate, right? So any kind of help that I can get, I look for it and get as much of that as I can. And this one, I mean, honestly, it sucks.
Wow.
Yeah, I would echo what Michelle says, especially classifying people as the working poor, where they may have a 40-plus hour job every week, but they're feeding multiple children, or they might have their grandchildren or nieces and nephews who are also living in that household. That when we look at that number on the page, we see that salary, and they may not fall into income guidelines. I work a lot with different universities all across the state. And the other population I really see that is kind of missed are the college students. Many people say, well, you can afford to go to college, why can't you afford to get food? And talking one-on-one with them, I help proctor and I'm a preceptor for nursing students and as they go into the public health sector. And one of the students was living in her car off of campus because she could not afford an apartment. And she said, I struggle to pay my rent, so I live in my car, as well as I struggle with food insecurity. So I think that's even kind of an area in our population that we maybe miss are those college students or even those working poor families as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think another statistic that I think that is probably not so widely known about the city of Sioux Falls and the school district, and Michelle's going to have the exact number, but roughly about 45% of the kids in our elementary schools qualify for free and reduced lunches. Mm-hmm. Which, when you think of Sioux Falls and what Sioux Falls really is and stands for, I think that's a number that really jumps out at me, that many, and nearly half of the kids that go to school in the public school system in Sioux Falls qualify for free and reduced lunch meals. So another thing, in the fact that Feeding South Dakota is a statewide organization, we look at a lot of those same statistics, but we look at them on a statewide basis. So we know that 1 in 9 South Dakotans are food insecure. So we're basically talking 100,000 South Dakotans that at some point in time during the year are going to be struggling to get access to enough food to feed them and their families. We know that there's about 1 in 6 are children, so we're talking roughly in the neighborhood about 40,000 kids in the state of South Dakota that are considered to fall into that food insecure category. And on top of that, there's 7 or 8% of our older adult population is also food insecure, so we're looking at another 14,000 or so, 14 or 15,000 seniors that are struggling with food insecurity each and every day. And I always challenge an audience when I speak to them to say, just take some time, and in your mind, I want you to imagine what you think the face of hunger looks like to you. And then I'll get back to you later, and we'll see what kind of a response we have with that. So,
Because between college students to seniors, you've really, it can touch anyone. And the fact that it's not always income specific, but there's so many other factors that play a part in that.
Right.
Josh, tell us what Food Temple Giveaway is. How did it begin? How has it evolved?
Absolutely. So the Faith Temple Food Giveaway began in 2009. My dad is a pastor of Faith Temple, and in that we were seeing dozens upon dozens of people coming in each and every day asking for help, whether it was for rent assistance or food or gas. And from that point, we really said, how are we able to tangibly help them where they're at? So that's when the Faith Temple Food Giveaway started. So it started within the church, but quickly became a large organization and is now a 501c3. So while it started in a church and we still have some of those same missions and attitudes, we have really focused on, what is our community and how are we able to meet our community just even from a faith-based program where it started.
And would you attribute that growth to growing need?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the first giveaway that we had about 70 people attend. Shortly after, about 4 weeks later, our numbers had jumped to about 800 people on a specific Friday. So, and that was in 2009. So we have seen ups and downs, and even with the pandemic, some of those numbers have changed as well versus when we started. So it has grown significantly due to the need of food resources in specifically Sioux Falls.
Wow. Matt, I can't imagine there's a person in this room who hasn't heard of Feeding South Dakota. But what you do is actually sometimes misunderstood. Tell us about Feeding South Dakota.
well, thank you, Cindy. Feeding South Dakota, again, we're a statewide private nonprofit organization whose mission it is to try to end hunger in South Dakota. We do that through a series of different programs that we operate. But I think the one thing that most people probably don't understand about our organization is the fact that, one, we are statewide, that we have partnered with something in the neighborhood of about 275 nonprofit organizations across the entire state that we help provide food to them that they then use in their programs to serve the folks in their programs in the communities which they operate in. You know, that's the part of our organization that literally takes us statewide. That takes us into every one of the 66 counties of South Dakota. On top of that, you know, we are currently doing about 125 to 127 what we call mobile distribution. So we're going into communities that don't have a lot of resources. They maybe don't have an organization that's doing consistent charitable hunger relief work. And so we go into those communities and provide a mobile distribution to help folks that are struggling to get food on their tables, to have access to food when otherwise they may not need to do that. You know, we're on pace over this last fiscal year, so we go July through June at about 1.5 million pounds a month that we distribute, which is going to put us on pace to do about 18 million pounds of food total in this fiscal year. We're providing food to about 15 to 20,000 households each and every month. And we do that consistently. Our goal with those mobile distributions is we want to be in every one of those communities each and every month, right? Some of them right now, maybe we're only there every 6 weeks or so, but we're driving to get to word in those communities at least once every month. So those people that in remote rural communities of South Dakota will have as much access to food as somebody here in Sioux Falls would have, or in Rapid City. And so that's really you know, the big part of our work. That's a part that I don't think a lot of people understand. I think they understand the pantry that we used to have, which we closed during the pandemic and have decided not to reopen, simply because we're going to repurpose our distribution model for how we get food to individuals in our metropolitan areas. And so we've closed the doors of our fixed pantries, and we now are doing neighborhood distributions. We're doing smaller, more mobile distributions in communities, or excuse me, in neighborhoods all across the city. So in Sioux Falls right now, we're doing about 15 different neighborhoods. We're doing about 18 different neighborhoods in Rapid City. And we're doing those neighborhoods once every month too. And just, it's really about taking food to where hunger is, instead of hunger having to come to where the food is. So rather than them having to come to us, we're going to try to meet them where their needs are at.
That's powerful. Michelle, when I think about Sioux Falls Thrive plays a different role in food insecurity. Tell this room what Sioux Falls Thrive is and how it fits into this conversation about food insecurity.
Sure. Thanks, Cindy. And thanks to Rotary, too, for having us. This is one of those topics that I think a lot of us don't really pay attention to maybe all the time, and it's kind of gut-wrenching to hear the stories, so I'm grateful that you invited us to be here today. Sioux Falls Thrive is actually the workforce development partnership with Forward Sioux Falls. It was born 4 years ago, and you all know our founding executive, Candy Hansen, who came out of the Community Foundation to begin the work of Thrive. Thrive is, as the introduction said, a cradle-to-career program, which means we're looking at all the children in Sioux Falls, but in particular that 1/3 of children in Sioux Falls who are facing some sort of obstacle to their educational progress, to what's their potential. So we don't look at that school system necessarily. We work a lot with them. We have Dr. Jane Stavum on our board, on the Sioux Falls Thrive board, but we don't look at the classroom necessarily because we know we have an awesome school system. What we look at is the 80% of children's time when they're spent outside the classroom. They really only spend 20% of their time in a classroom. So we're looking at 3 areas. One is affordable housing, which is key for so many things to be successful, right? If a child doesn't know where they're sleeping tonight, they're going to have a hard time getting their math problems done in school today, right? The second is out of school time, which is becoming a huge issue, and you'll see it on the national news even, that daycare, the expense, the cost of providing daycare is astronomical at this time, and it's no different in Sioux Falls. And so out of school time is a huge push for Sioux Falls Thrive. And then the third one, of course, is that food security piece. We're built on a system of action teams so that we are building collaboration among a variety of organizations. There was a time in Sioux Falls when you may not have seen Matt Gassen and Josh Hayes at the same table, but they are both on the food security action team with Sioux Falls Thrive because it's that critical for all of us to break down those silos that we've built. We're good at turf wars when it comes to how I can help better than you can help. Or the other thing that when I took this job about a year and a half ago, people asked me, what are you going to do? And it really is that concept of, I know that both these guys have similar jobs. I need them to be at the table together and with other folks that are doing the same sort of work, and have that conversation with, well, I had no idea you even did that. And can we come together and can we figure out how to do these things together? And that's really it, is building that collaboration. We work on a process called collective impact, and Sioux Falls Thrive is a backbone organization. We do not provide programming specifically, but we do provide that facilitated collaboration, so that we're looking at, one of the great things about Sioux Falls is that we all have really big hearts. We're a very generous community, and we're full of programs that are here to help. But the piece of that that's missing in a lot of cases is the system around that. And so we have a slide when we do presentations that Candy calls the plate of spaghetti, because it's literally the map that we drew of housing programming in Sioux Falls. And all of the connections, it is twisted and messy, and it's difficult as a person in need to find out where and how to get help. So our job is really to untangle that plate of spaghetti. When it comes to food security, it really has been about bringing folks like Josh and Matt together, but lots of other people as well. And so the final sort of piece of that is that we're doing such sort of high level work. If you were to jump into an action team meeting, you'll see us talking about everything from, how do we help people prevent evictions, to we need to get meals into kids' mouths in the Laura B. Anderson neighborhood. We do that vast range of really high-level work. And about a year and a half ago, the Thrive board said, we're doing really big stuff, hard to see the short-term wins with that. And so we're grateful to Denny Sanford for stepping forward and providing the funds for an initiative called KidLink. And KidLink will fund 3 neighborhood projects, and that's why we did the data that we did in the Laura B. Anderson neighborhood. KidLink is focused on all of these pieces, again, out of school, housing, and food security in one neighborhood. And so we've been on the ground there. It'll be a year on the 1st of June. And just really working on proving those theories that we're coming up with. And one of them is that Laura B. Anderson is one of the first of the mobile food pantries. And we're seeing huge success with that, in that concept of bringing the services to a neighborhood that has been lacking in so many ways. So Thrive is big, and Thrive has very narrow focus as well in the variety of things that we're doing. Big picture, but I can certainly answer more details as we go along.
Sure. Well, I think that's a nice perspective of the big picture work that's happening maybe at a macro level, a broader community level, but then the direct service work, they both have to be happening hand in hand. And Josh, Matt, just listening to the numbers that your organizations serve individually, you're not the only 2 organizations helping feed people in our community. If you were to estimate, how many different organizations do you think are responding to the food insecure, helping feed people, whether it's their entire mission or maybe even just part of their mission? How big is that response that we have in our community? Matt, do you have a sense of that?
Maybe to some degree, because there's so many variations. It could be as simple as, like Josh said, where Faith Temple started by having a pantry in their church. So churches will do that oftentimes to try to meet the needs of their congregations. Others have expanded that out to, depending on what their mission is, it might be a Boys and Girls Club or something like that that's providing, additional food assistance to the families, the children that are in their programs. It could be, we have Charis Ministries, which is part of the ELCA church mission here in Sioux Falls, to run a program that's called Food to You. So they do mobile distributions on Thursday nights, every Thursday night of the month in different locations, based at different churches of theirs in the city. It's really hard, I think, to put a number on that because it's happening in various levels. Everything from what we do, Faith Temple, Food to You, to somebody feeding or providing a handful of meals to a group in some part of the city. We have done significant, or trying to do significant work around GIS mapping so that we can identify where the gaps of access to charitable food are in our cities and our state. And so in that effort, we're hoping to be able to better identify, who is doing charitable food distribution so that we know where you're at. So it's not that we are desperate to know where you're at and what you're doing, it's just so that we don't duplicate effort, because I think that's one of the challenges that we have in our work is that, there's enough work to keep everybody busy, but we got to be careful that we're not duplicating our efforts and really working on top of each other, because if we're doing that, then somebody else isn't getting served that could be served. So it's really about really being more nimble with your programs and your operations to be able to go to where literally where hunger's at, rather than just trying to serve the same group or the same area repeatedly through multiple different programs.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that there are so many different niche groups that are feeding people in our community, whether that is through food that they can take home or even food that they are able to eat on site as well, kind of like the banquet does. As well as I think that there are, we've seen a lot of just even community organizations or community groups coming together to say, hey, let's put up a food pantry kind of box in front of our building to meet the need of our neighborhood. So I think that's something too that we maybe don't see or don't have the numbers for, are just those organic and grassroots food insecurity programs that just a normal citizen says, hey, I want to step up, I want to make an active difference in my own community. So, so I think that trying to estimate the number, I think we could estimate it, but I think it's a lot greater than what we could even estimate, which is a great problem to have here in Sioux Falls.
Well, in so many different ways that you're doing it, when I think about just the box and a small group doing that. But then, Matt, when you're talking about such sophisticated tracking and elements as well, there's quite a spectrum of those pieces. And, Josh, your work is connected with the church. In what ways is the faith community involved in responding to the issue?
Absolutely. So one of the founding principles that we were founded on was directly from the Bible, where Jesus says, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was naked, you clothed me. And that's really what our mission is. We want to be able to reach people who are hungry. And I think as the faith community, being able to bind together for that one goal, we might have different denominations, we might have different spectrums, but at the same time, we really want to be able to help people. That's our main goal. And I think that's really kind of within the faith community of even Sioux Falls, that especially with COVID, the faith community has really stepped up and said this is a need, and we want to be able to partner with organizations and entities to be able to fight this, whether it is having a pantry in their church or partnering together to donate funds or donate in-kind food to be able to pass on to those who are living in food insecurity.
You mentioned the word COVID. Like it did most everything else, COVID impacted your work. Josh, let's start with you. How did COVID play a part in what you saw in the needs of those that you served and how you were able to meet those needs?
Absolutely. So in January, February, March of last year, we were on average having about 400 individuals coming out to our building and picking up food. Once COVID hit, we had to alter our operations where we created a drive-through where the guests would stay inside their vehicles, that we would have volunteers load a box directly into their car to prevent cross-contamination and to keep social distancing. And we saw within that first month, our numbers hit about 1,200 people. So in that, we saw a 200% growth of people who are in need of food, especially those few months. And even since then, the numbers have dropped to about 1,000 to 800 individuals coming physically to our site every Friday. But it is something that we've seen, even still 100% growth versus this time 2 years ago. So it's definitely, the need is still here. And I think COVID just really flushed that out.
Matt, you spoke to it, alluded to it a little bit. Talk about the impact you saw and how Feeding South Dakota responded.
Yeah, I mean, much like Josh alluded to, that, in March of last year when COVID really became a part of our life, it required all of us to really change our distribution models to one in which, any food that we distributed really had to be pre-boxed, and it had to be placed in vehicles as people drove by so that we could minimize that contact. For us, it was the closure of our pantry because it was like a store. So we had a waiting room. We couldn't really have people coming in because of the risk of spreading COVID. So we closed the door of our food pantry, which really drove all of our distribution external to our facilities, both here in Sioux Falls and in Rapid City. And so by changing that model, we really initially started with a major concern that I had was the amount of resources that we had as both a community and as a state. And was there going to be enough resources to meet the hunger needs that we were starting to see early on for the long duration? Because at the beginning, nobody knew how long this was going to last. And so we really started by realizing that if we could get folks to come together, we could really combine those resources. We could make them last longer. And we really did that by doing kind of a larger central distribution like here in Sioux Falls. So we started doing one at the Expo building in the fairgrounds. And when we used up our time there, we moved to the old Fairway store on 41st Avenue. And then when that building got leased underneath us, then we moved out to the Wells Fargo building. But in all of that time, it was really about just trying to meet the needs that we were seeing in this city, and we were doing like things in rural communities and in the Rapid Cities and the Piers of South Dakota as well. And it really was a challenging time, but it was a time in which, as an organization, we focused on a singular program. We really stopped doing a lot of the things that we'd been doing prior to COVID, and we concentrated all our efforts. So on the 14th of March, we started packing boxes in our warehouse of foods that we could distribute them. And we're still doing that today. And at the end of the pandemic, whenever we declare an end to this thing and we look back, the heroes of this event are going to be the volunteers, at least in our world. Because we had volunteers coming into our facility through the entire pandemic, people that were willing to take that risk to come out, expose themselves, because they understood the need that we have for those extra hands to pack the number of boxes that we need to distribute to those 15 or 20,000 households each and every month. And we couldn't do that without volunteers. I don't have enough staff to even come remotely close to keeping up with that. So it was the volunteers that really made that happen. And in doing so, I think we were able to really help people understand that the work we do. And I think it gave people that were oftentimes closed up, shut in because of the pandemic, an opportunity to come out and do something meaningful, give them purpose. Many of you in the room have spent time in our facility before, during, and hopefully after COVID. We'll be eternally grateful to all of you for that support, because without you, we wouldn't have been able to come remotely close to meeting the need that we've seen since the pandemic. And if I could add one other thing, it would be that the numbers that we talk about back in March a year ago to where we are today, to what is that going to look like in the future, I can tell you, experience tells me that we're going to be dealing with a significant increase in the number of people seeking food assistance far beyond the pandemic. The economic impact that this pandemic had on the lives of families is going to go long beyond the pandemic itself. I talk about people that lost hours and maybe lost their job, and they were middle or upper income earners, right? And now they're back to work because we're down to virtually no unemployment again, right, at 3%. those people are going to have an opportunity really to make up the ground that they lost during that time, right? It's going to take them a while, but they're going to have the resources to do that. The rest of those people that we deal with on a daily basis virtually are the ones who, when they lost their jobs, it set them so far behind, they will never, if ever, be able to really catch up. And so they're going to need the help of charitable food assistance far beyond the pandemic. We were just starting to see national numbers come down from the recession of 2008 when the pandemic hit and drove those numbers back up. For the first time in America, they were down to about 35 million people that were considered food insecure. And after the pandemic struck, that number went to over 50 million, again, people that were food insecure. And so, that's one of the challenges I think we're going to see ongoing, is just that need for people that need food assistance far beyond the pandemic.
I think that is such a powerful perspective. And those who come to receive food, they don't pay for that food. Where does the money come from? Where does the food come from?
Well, in the case of Feeding South Dakota, because we're a private nonprofit, it comes from businesses, corporations, and individuals that believe in our mission and want to support it. The food comes to us from a lot of different sources. We're affiliated with Feeding America, so Feeding America has created partnerships with all the major food manufacturers in America. So if you think of one, they're probably a partner: General Mills, Kellogg's, Kraft, Conagra, Nestle's, the list goes on and on and on. And these corporations donate product into the network of 200 food banks. So we get access to those loads of product that are coming from manufacturers. Our only cost isn't in the products, it's in the transportation, get it from wherever it's being donated back to Sioux Falls and then to store and redistribute that. Retail, we're picking up product from retail settings, grocery stores, convenience stores in this city each and every day. This is stuff that's coming off the shelves, and if we weren't there to capture it, probably would end up in a dumpster or a landfill eventually. So we're able to capture that and use that to feed hungry people. We have the benefit, and there's one of those in this room, that in the midst of a crisis that impacted their business significantly, they chose to take excess product they had and donate it to organizations like Faith Temple and Feeding South Dakota that we were able to use to feed hungry people early on in the pandemic. And it's those businesses in our community that realize that it's not great for us, but we're still going to do the right thing, and we'll change our model and we'll come out on the other end, and thankfully they have. And so we're just so blessed. I think all of us would sit here and say we're so blessed to be able to get to do the work that we do in this state. I wouldn't want to do the work I'm doing anywhere else in America, because South Dakotans are so giving and so charitable and so trusting, and they understand that when they give to us that we're going to be the very best steward we can of your donations to make them feed as many people as we can.
And Josh, how did the community respond to the increased need with your organization? And in general, did you see a change in philanthropy during COVID?
Absolutely, we did. So it was something where people saw within their own households, within their families, that they were seeing people who never before needed food resources, and they didn't know what to do, so they said, hey, how can we help? So their time, they were able to volunteer significantly. We saw large amounts of groups coming in, or individuals. We also saw people who gave financially to be able to purchase more product, to be able to get into those households, as well as just even their voice, being able to be an advocate by saying, I might not have much. And we saw this with a lot of college students, where they said, I don't have a lot of time, I don't have a lot of money, but I want to share my voice. I want to share on social media that this is a cause that I'm passionate for. And I think all three of those are influential. And I think COVID really exposed just some of the things that were already there. I think that while there are some new things, I think COVID really did just expose some issues that maybe were already within that structure, but just really seeing how, like Matt said, businesses as well as companies and even families came together to donate their time, money, and voices. I remember a little boy who's about 7 years old, and he brought a physical piggy bank to our food giveaway on a Friday and said, hey, this was my birthday gift this week or this month. I had all my friends fill this, and here is $37. Make sure to feed others in need. So I think it's those types of stories that really make an impact and really show that, especially during COVID, even the kids, they step up. They're not unaware of what's going on, but they truly see what the need in our community is, and just giving them the opportunity to step up and make a difference as well.
Wow. We're stepping into another critical time for those who are food insecure, summer. Michelle, you mentioned that out of school time versus in school time. Talk about the roles schools play in feeding children and families, and how that changes, what challenges may come about when school's out for the summer months.
That's a profound question, Cindy, because we really do look at that concept of mom and dad aren't making enough money to necessarily keep up with it. And many, as Matt said, we're in the 45% range for kids who are on free and reduced lunch. Those children rely on their school breakfast and their school lunch. That very often is the only 2 meals in that child's day. And so when school lets out, there are other options. But one of the pieces that we keep running into is that communications piece, that it's tough for a parent to know what don't want to sound like I'm scolding us as a community, but we are at a point where we got to get beyond that idea that everybody's just jumping on their phone and finding information about it, because more than 15% of our community is without access to Wi-Fi and has no sort of electronic device in their home. And so it's a big deal that we figure out all the various avenues for connecting those people to the resources that are available.
Matt, I think about the backpack program and how your organization has really built a very special partnership with the schools. How does your work change during the summer versus during the school year?
Especially as we talk about the child hunger program piece of our work, it becomes a lot more challenging in the summertime. The backpack program provides that sack of food on the weekend for kids to take home, but if they get while they're in school on Friday afternoons. But in the summertime, those kids aren't in those schools on a Friday afternoon. They're spread out all over the city. And the real challenge is, how do we get, that food, that supplemental food to those children in the summertime? And it's, I'll be transparent and honest with you, it's a challenge that we have struggled mightily with on how to do it. We've done a mobile backpack program for a couple summers where we've tried to go into different areas of the neighborhood and set for a half hour, an hour to get backpacks into the kids' hands. And it's just so difficult to do that, because the kids are either doing something, or they're holed up in the house because mom and dad are working and they're told not to go outside, or just so many variables. So it really is difficult. The summer feeding programs that USDA provides, I think Sioux Falls has 8 sites, something like that. Most of them are based out of schools. That's one access point. And then there's just all the other charitable work that's going on to try to get food to kids. But it's really a challenge. That's probably the time of year I worry most about the kids in our community is during those summer months when when they're not in one place together, like in a school, where you can get access to hundreds of kids at a whack. And without the school setting, it's just really, really a challenge.
Cindy, if I could add to that, something that happened to us last week, and I mentioned the Boys and Girls Club is doing this supper and snack thing. But we're in the programming that we're doing, the initiative that we're doing at LBA, we're asking parents, family members to sign up for those kids to get that delivery. And one of the reactions that we got from a family member, from a mother, was, "We're good now. We don't have to worry about it. We're not going to sign up right now." And that to me goes back to that concept of food insecurity. They are okay this week. They're not going to sign up for something that they might really need in a month. And so it is, but Matt's right. It's that getting to those families and helping them understand that this is accessible for them it's a tough go.
Time has flown, but I got to stay with you for a second, Matt.
Please.
You've been doing this work for an awfully long time. I believe Jason's bio 1999. And you're sunsetting your career.
I am.
August
31st.
I don't know about this room, but I don't know how our community could do what it does with food insecurity without the work that you've led for decades. And I hope this room would help me thank Matt for his service.
Thank you.
And now that go ahead.
If I could, and I want to go back to the question I asked about what does food insecurity look like to you? And just share with you that I believe that it looks just like you and I. In our city, hunger looks no different than each one of us. It's that neighbor that lives by you. It's that elderly couple you sit by in church on Sundays. It's a kid you see playing in the playground. And I think that's the one thing that I would like to leave you with, is to understand that in our community, in our state, hunger isn't easy to spot, but just know that it's here, it's with us, it's everywhere, each and every day.
Well, I'd like to thank those of you in the room and those of you online for being a part of this important conversation. And thanks for all of you for being here too.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much for this important moderated conversation on such an important topic. I appreciate the work that all three of you do and bring to this community. Next week will be the 1-year anniversary of the George Floyd tragedy. And our program will touch on that. A year later, building understanding and community. We look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you, everybody.